In a world addicted to noise, he built an empire on quiet. Koum, a man who rarely spoke, created an app that spoke for billions. While others chased attention, he pursued absence. No ads, no pop-ups, no distractions. Just connection. The irony was perfect. A man who once couldn't afford to call home would one day let the world talk for free. He was never the loud type. No speeches, no slogans, no spotlight. Just code, clean, simple human. To most, technology was about power. To him, it was about dignity. He didn't want to sell people anything. He wanted to give them something they had forgotten: privacy, silence, and trust. His story began far from Silicon Valley, in a small Ukrainian village where phones were tapped, words were dangerous, and silence was survival. He grew up learning that the walls could listen, that truth needed protection. And decades later, that same fear would become his mission. He believed technology didn't need to shout to be heard. It needed to listen. When he built WhatsApp, he refused the rules of the digital age. No algorithms, no manipulation, no exploitation. Just a simple promise: your words belong to you. So who is Koum? Really a programmer who hated noise, or a philosopher disguised as an engineer? He never wanted fame. He wanted freedom. And in the end, that's what he gave the world: a way to speak without being watched, to connect without being sold, to exist without shouting. Koum didn't chase the noise of success. He mastered the power of silence. Before the billions of messages, before the blue ticks and encryption keys, there was a boy walking through the cold streets of a Soviet village carrying a bucket of water for his family. Koum was born in 1976 in Fastiv, Ukraine, a world where privacy did not exist and scarcity was the air people breathed. His father worked in construction, his mother struggled to keep the home warm, and the government listened to every conversation. There were no secrets, no freedom, only the quiet discipline of survival. He grew up learning to fix things: broken radios, old wires, hand-me-down tools. The language of machines made more sense than the language of people. In a country where words could get you punished, silence was a kind of armor. When he was 16, his mother decided to escape. They packed their lives into a few plastic bags and boarded a plane to America. His father stayed behind. The flight landed in California, but their new world was not the America of dreams. It was the America of food stamps, public housing, and second-hand clothes. Cleaned floors at a grocery store while his mother worked as a babysitter. They barely spoke English. Poverty followed them, but now it was freer, lighter, the kind you could fight with hard work. He found refuge in the public library where warmth was free and the internet was still a mystery. There, among dusty manuals and humming screens, he discovered the thing that would change his life code. Programming became his language, his escape, his rebellion. He taught himself from borrowed books and broken computers. No one believed in him, and that suited him just fine. He didn't want attention. He wanted mastery. His mother supported him as best she could, even as she fell ill with cancer. When the phone bill became too high, they rationed calls back to Ukraine, limiting love to minutes. For Jan, every silence on the line became a wound. Years later, that pain would shape the app he built, one that made distance disappear, one that made connection free. He enrolled at San Jose State University, studying computer science, while working nights as a cleaner at a tech company. He wasn't the loud, confident kind of student. He was the shadow in the back row, always observing, always building. His professors remembered him not for his words, but for his precision, the way he could make code do more by saying less. When his mother passed away, he was alone. A young immigrant with no money, no family, but a will, sharpened by loss. That grief didn't break him. It refined him. It stripped life down to what mattered: truth, trust, and simplicity. He had seen what control looked like in the Soviet Union, the surveillance, the fear, the pretense. And he had seen what freedom cost in America: noise, chaos, distraction. Somewhere between the two, he began to dream of something different. A tool that respected silence. A space that didn't spy. A connection that didn't exploit. Koum didn't set out to build an empire. He set out to build a sanctuary for communication, for privacy, for the quiet dignity of being human in a world that never stops talking. In the early 2000s, Silicon Valley was exploding with ambition, loud, bright, and restless. But Jan Koum didn't fit that world. While others pitched investors in polished suits, he arrived in jeans and silence. His power was not in words, but in precision. He had no interest in becoming famous. He wanted to build things that worked. At San Jose State University, he studied computer science by day and cleaned offices by night. The smell of disinfectant, the hum of servers, that was his classroom. He had no mentors, no network, no funding. What he had was hunger. His code was clean, fast, ruthless in its simplicity. It was his way of imposing order on a chaotic world. Then came his break. Yahoo hired him as a security engineer. It was 1997, the dawn of the digital age. He was 21, quiet, analytical, uncomfortable with small talk, but brilliant at solving problems no one else could. There he met another outsider, Brian Acton, a cheerful, open engineer who saw through Koum's guarded exterior. The two became unlikely friends, the optimist and the cynic, the talker and the silent one. For 9 years at Yahoo, Jan learned everything about scale systems, and most of all, the compromises of modern tech. He watched as user data became currency, privacy, a commodity, and the line between service and surveillance blurred. The advertising world revolved around one thing: tracking people. To Jan, it felt like betrayal. Technology was supposed to empower people, not study them. He stayed quiet, observing, collecting lessons. Every pop-up ad, every algorithmic intrusion, every privacy breach, he remembered them all. By the time he left Yahoo in 2007, he was tired. Not of technology, but of what it had become. Then, life reminded him of loss. His mother's cancer returned, and soon after she was gone. She had been his anchor, the reason he worked, the reason he hoped. Her death left him untethered, floating in grief. He found solace in long walks in solitude, in lines of code. He had seen too much noise, both in the world and in himself. What he wanted now was clarity. He dreamed of something, pure technology that asked for nothing but trust. No ads, no manipulation, no intrusion. Just communication as it should be, private, honest, human. He carried that idea quietly for years, letting it steep like a thought too fragile for the spotlight. He didn't know it yet, but all the cold nights, all the silences, all the years of restraint were preparing him for one moment, the moment when he would finally turn pain into purpose. He had built firewalls for others. Now he would build freedom for himself. Jan Koum's revolution would not begin with a pitch deck or a boardroom. It would begin with a phone, one that refused to ring when the world demanded noise. The code was already forming in his mind, minimal, secure, invisible. He wasn't writing software. He was writing a philosophy. The idea came to him on a winter day in 2009, ordinary, almost accidental. His iPhone had just stopped working. His SIM card locked his contacts unreachable. For most people, it was an inconvenience. For Jan Koum, it was revelation. In a world built on connection, communication still depended on control, on phone companies, on borders, on cost. He wanted to break that dependence. He wanted to build something that worked anywhere for anyone without asking permission. He sat at his kitchen table in Mountain View, surrounded by the quiet clutter of a one-bedroom apartment. The name came first: WhatsApp. Simple, playful, a whisper of "what's up" written in code. He opened Xcode on his old MacBook and began to build an app that did only one thing: let people update their status. No profile pictures, no feeds, no noise. Just words. Just presence. But simplicity, he knew, was the hardest thing to engineer. For weeks the app crashed, glitched, refused to work. He almost gave up. Then Apple launched push notifications, a small feature that would change everything. Now every status update could alert friends instantly. Suddenly WhatsApp was no longer static. It was alive. Brian Acton, his friend from Yahoo, joined him soon after. Two men in their 40s, unemployed, sitting in a rented office above a bakery, coding, debugging, believing. They didn't talk about disruption or domination. They talked about integrity. They refused investors, refused ads, refused to sell attention. Their mission was written on the wall: no ads, no games, no gimmicks. They wanted to create the most honest product in Silicon Valley, one that respected users instead of exploiting them. Messages were encrypted. Data was never sold. Conversations vanished from servers once delivered. It was privacy as design, not as feature. And the world noticed. WhatsApp began spreading quietly, organically. No marketing, no campaigns, no hype. People discovered it the way real trust spreads through word of mouth. Immigrants used it to talk with families they couldn't afford to call. Parents used it to check on children overseas. Activists used it to organize in places where free speech was forbidden. In less than 2 years, the app crossed 50 million users. By 2013, it had 500 million. All built on one principle: silence is stronger than noise. Koum never sought the spotlight. He avoided interviews, avoided investors, avoided anything that required performance. His focus was absolute: to make communication invisible, seamless, human. He said little, but his work spoke loudly. WhatsApp didn't conquer the world with features. It conquered it with restraint. In an era when every company wanted more data, more engagement, more addiction, Koum built the opposite: a tool that asked for nothing and gave everything. He wasn't trying to create the next big thing. He was trying to build something good. And in doing so, he created the quietest revolution in the history of technology. One message, one connection, one whisper at a time. By 2013, the quiet idea born on a kitchen table had become a global heartbeat. WhatsApp wasn't just an app anymore, it was a language. In Brazil, families used it to send prayers. In India, merchants used it to run their businesses. In the Middle East, soldiers whispered home through it. In every corner of the world, people were connecting through something almost invisible. There were no ads, no banners, no noise, just messages, carrying the weight of real lives. Koum never advertised it. He never needed to. The product grew the way trust does, slowly, silently, through people telling people. By the time WhatsApp hit 400 million users, the team had fewer than 50 employees. No lavish offices, no marketing departments, no endless meetings. Just engineers, keyboards, and conviction. Koum and Brian Acton ran the company with a kind of purity that felt anachronistic in Silicon Valley. They refused to collect data, refused to build algorithms that exploited behavior. Every decision began with one question: would we want our mothers using this app? That simple question became the company's moral compass. But success came knocking loudly. The same investors who once ignored them now lined up with checkbooks and promises. Koum avoided them all. He didn't trust the noise. He didn't want to sell his users' attention. He wanted to protect it. Then, in 2014, the knock became impossible to ignore. Facebook offered to buy WhatsApp for $19 billion, one of the largest acquisitions in tech history. Koum hesitated. He wasn't tempted by money. He was afraid of what money could change. The thought of placing his creation, a product built on silence and trust, inside a company that lived off surveillance and engagement, terrified him. But Facebook promised autonomy, freedom, independence. They promised that WhatsApp would remain ad-free, private, sacred. After months of deliberation, he agreed. He signed the deal on the door of the welfare office where he and his mother once collected food stamps. It was his full circle, the boy who had scrubbed floors, now writing a signature worth more than the GDP of small nations. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He just went home. Because for Koum, the money was irrelevant. The mission wasn't. He stayed on to protect what he had built: encryption, simplicity, and the quiet promise that your messages were yours alone. While other companies shouted about innovation, WhatsApp continued to whisper, serving billions, not selling them. He had proven that a company didn't need to manipulate to matter, that honesty could scale. He built the world's most connected network by refusing to exploit the very people it connected. And as the world listened through his app, Koum remained silent. Because for him, the work was never about being heard. It was about letting others speak freely. It began quietly, not with conflict, but with questions. Facebook had kept its promises for a while: no ads, no tracking, no intrusion. WhatsApp grew faster than ever, crossing 1 billion users, becoming the default language of connection. But inside the walls of Menlo Park, a different philosophy was brewing, one built not on trust, but on data. Facebook didn't just connect people, it monetized them. And soon that culture came knocking on Koum's door. He had always known this day would come. He just hoped it wouldn't come so soon. The pressure started subtly requests to integrate more user data to enhance personalization to unlock business potential. To Koum, these were euphemisms for surveillance. He had spent his whole life running from systems that watched people. Now those same systems wanted to live inside the product he built to protect them. He pushed back. Meetings grew tense. Memos grew longer. Each decision became a negotiation between two opposing worlds, one that believed in privacy and one that believed privacy was inefficient. Koum argued that trust was the real product. Facebook argued that trust didn't pay the bills. It was the same story that had defined his life: integrity versus convenience, silence versus noise. For years, he resisted. He defended encryption, refused data sharing, and kept the ads out. But the tide was rising. Facebook was a machine built to measure engagement, and WhatsApp, clean, quiet, unmonetized, was the one part it couldn't understand. He realized then that he was no longer protecting his company. He was protecting his soul. In 2018, he walked away, leaving billions of dollars in unvested stock behind. There was no farewell speech, no press tour, no bitterness, just silence. He left the same way he had built everything: quietly, deliberately, with dignity. When asked why, he said only this: respect for privacy is not negotiable. It wasn't rebellion, it was clarity. He had built something pure in an industry obsessed with power. He had shown that technology could serve people without exploiting them, and when that truth no longer fit the environment, he chose to leave rather than compromise it. Koum didn't lose a company that day. He kept himself. In a world that measures success by accumulation, his departure was a rare act of subtraction, proof that sometimes the greatest strength is the ability to walk away. He had given billions of people their voices. Now, he reclaimed his own silence. And as he disappeared from the noise of Silicon Valley, one truth lingered in the static: that integrity, though invisible, still echoes louder than profit ever will. After Koum left Facebook, the world expected another startup, another headline, another disruption. But he vanished. No press, no interviews, no announcements. The man who gave the planet a way to speak freely simply chose not to speak at all. He returned to what had always defined him: quiet. He bought land, collected cars, supported charities. He donated hundreds of millions to education, to Jewish community centers, to causes that built people, not platforms. While the rest of Silicon Valley chased visibility, Koum built invisibility, a life lived on his own terms, away from the noise he'd spent years silencing. He never saw himself as a visionary. He was an engineer of restraint, a craftsman of simplicity. He didn't invent the internet or social media, he purified them. In an era where every company fought for attention, he created one that respected absence. Where others harvested data, he deleted it. That was his revolution. He believed that real connection doesn't require noise, only honesty. That technology, when stripped of vanity, could become sacred again, something quiet enough to hold human truth. He proved that privacy wasn't nostalgia. It was necessity. He didn't build WhatsApp to make the world smaller. He built it to make it closer. And even after he left, that vision endures. Every encrypted message, every moment of digital intimacy between families and lovers and strangers carries his fingerprint, the idea that communication can exist without compromise. In Silicon Valley, they call him an enigma. To him, that's a compliment. He never wanted to be understood. He wanted to be useful. He had lived through regimes that punished speech and economies that sold it. So he gave the world something rare, a space where words could simply be. Years later, when asked what he's most proud of, he didn't mention the money, the company, or the acquisition. He said, "We built something people could trust." That's his legacy, not the billions, not the headlines, but the invisible peace that comes when technology finally remembers its purpose. Koum didn't chase disruption. He built integrity into code. And as the world grows louder, faster, more desperate to be heard, his story remains a quiet contradiction, proof that silence, when shaped by principle, can move the world. He left the stage with no applause, no speech, no goodbye, only the faint sound of a notification tone, a whisper in the noise, a message delivered, a connection made. Koum didn't just change how we communicate. He reminded us why we do.